It always starts the same way, with someone trying to be good, to be kind, to be helpful. The story of evil never begins with monsters. It begins with ordinary people who simply didn't want to cause trouble. You tell yourself you'd never cross that line, you'd never hurt someone, you'd never become part of something cruel. But that's what almost everyone believes, right? Until they do. The truth is, human behavior isn't divided neatly into good and bad. It's a spectrum, shaped by situation, pressure, and the terrifying need to belong. This is where psychologist Philip Zimbardo introduced something he called the Lucifer Effect, the transformation of good people into perpetrators of harm when placed in corrupting systems. And it doesn't start with hate. It starts with obedience, with politeness, with kindness that doesn't know how to say no. Think about it. The people who hurt others most often aren't born villains. They're the ones who couldn't resist authority, who wanted approval, who followed the rules even when the rules were wrong. Kindness, without boundaries, becomes compliance. Empathy, without self-awareness, becomes manipulation. Goodness, without courage, becomes complicity. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment in 1971 revealed how terrifyingly easy this shift can happen. 24 college students, normal, friendly, mentally stable, volunteered to play guards and prisoners in a simulated prison. Within days, the guards began humiliating the prisoners. They didn't start as sadists. They started as ordinary young men trying to do a good job. But the uniform, the system, the collective illusion of power turned their empathy off like a switch. This wasn't about monsters, it was about context. Put a good person in a bad system, and the system often wins. The kindness they once had gets redirected. They convince themselves that cruelty is duty, that silence is professionalism, that obedience is morality. And here's the unsettling truth. This doesn't just happen in prisons. It happens in offices, in families, in governments, in relationships. Everywhere that power demands silence, kindness becomes the perfect disguise for submission. You've seen it, the employee who keeps quiet when the boss humiliates someone to keep the peace. The friend who forgives again and again, calling it compassion but really fearing confrontation. The partner who absorbs disrespect because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. The parent who teaches the child to be polite even when they're uncomfortable. All of them believe they're being good, they're being kind. But what they're really doing is dissolving themselves to maintain harmony. Psychologically, this process is called moral disengagement. It's how our brain justifies cruelty. We rename harm as help. We dehumanize others subtly, calling them difficult, crazy, lazy. The problem: we obey unjust rules because that's just how things are. And every time we comply, instead of question, we lose a small piece of integrity. Kindness without discernment becomes a tool of the oppressor. Because when you refuse to make anyone uncomfortable, the cruelest people stay comfortable. And still, it's not simple. The instinct to be kind runs deep. Its evolutionary social survival depended on cooperation. But kindness is meant to protect connection, not to erase conscience. When your kindness makes you tolerate the intolerable, it's no longer virtue, it's fear wearing a halo. Look at history, the nurses who assisted unethical experiments because doctors know best. The bureaucrats who stamped paperwork for atrocities because they were just doing their job. The citizens who watched neighbors vanish and told themselves, "It's not my place." None of them woke up wanting to be evil. They just wanted to stay safe, to stay liked, to stay out of trouble. This is the terrifying paradox of morality. Evil doesn't always demand cruelty. Sometimes it just asks for silence. You might think, but I'm not part of anything that dark. Yet every day, in small ways, this dynamic repeats. When you let someone cross your boundary because you don't want to seem rude. When you agree with a crowd to avoid tension. When you apologize for saying no. That's how moral erosion begins, not with hatred, but with hesitation. We are taught to be kind more than we are taught to be courageous. And kindness without courage isn't good, it's dangerous. That's the dark side of kindness, when empathy turns into self-betrayal, when decency becomes denial, when your desire to be good becomes someone else's permission to harm. The Lucifer Effect isn't about turning angels into demons overnight. It's about how ordinary decency bends, degree by degree, until one day you wake up realizing you've protected comfort instead of truth. And in that moment, kindness becomes corruption, not because it's false, but because it's incomplete. This is where the transformation begins. Not with evil intent, but with a gentle, human wish to belong. The hardest truth about the Lucifer Effect is that it doesn't just live in dictatorships or prisons, it lives in us. In the moments we silence ourselves to keep peace, in the times we rationalize harm as necessary. It's not about monsters out there, it's about mirrors. So how do you tell the difference between kindness and complicity, between empathy and enablement? It starts with awareness, the courage to look at your motives without judgment. When you say yes, is it out of love or fear? When you stay quiet, is it wisdom or avoidance? When you forgive, is it compassion or self-erasure? The first step is honesty, because without honesty, kindness becomes a weapon against yourself. Psychologists call this the shadow of virtue. Every strength carries its own distortion. Empathy can turn into self-neglect. Forgiveness can turn into denial. Patience can turn into paralysis. These shadows form when goodness becomes compulsive, when you can't stop being kind, even when it hurts you. That's the first red flag. When kindness feels like obligation instead of choice. Healthy kindness is conscious. Toxic kindness is reflexive. One expands you, the other erases you. Look deeper into the Lucifer Effect, and you'll find the same pattern. Good people losing agency. They follow rules blindly. They obey systems that reward conformity. They suppress their own discomfort until morality becomes numbness. The antidote is mindful defiance. The ability to say, "This feels wrong," even if everyone else says it's right. It's the courage to let your voice tremble, but still speak. To let someone be disappointed, but stay aligned with your values. Real kindness has boundaries. It says, "I care about you, but I won't join you in harm." It says, "I'll help, but not at the cost of my conscience." It says, "I want peace, but not silence." This isn't rebellion for its own sake. It's integrity. And integrity is the rarest form of courage in a world that rewards politeness over truth. The Lucifer Effect reminds us that systems don't corrupt us all at once. They seduce us. They offer belonging, validation, convenience. They make the good path seem naive and the easy path seem practical. They tell you everyone else is doing it. But morality has never been a democracy. It's a solitary decision repeated every day. Will I choose comfort or conscience? When you say no to something wrong, even softly, you interrupt the chain of moral disengagement. You remind the system that humanity still exists inside it. You prove that kindness doesn't have to mean surrender. And it's not just external systems, it's internal too. Every time you silence your anger to stay nice, you participate in your own oppression. Every time you absorb blame to keep the peace, you reenact the Lucifer Effect on a smaller, personal scale. The system becomes your own inner critic, demanding obedience, perfection, silence. So, the real act of rebellion is self-compassion, learning to say, "I can be kind and assertive. I can love people and still say no. I can forgive and still hold accountability." This integration is how we reclaim our power, because kindness, when paired with courage, becomes unstoppable. Zimbardo himself later said that understanding evil isn't enough. We must also study heroism, the everyday courage of people who resist conformity. He called it the heroic imagination project, the belief that each of us has the capacity to stand up, to disrupt, to act. Being kind isn't about keeping everyone comfortable, it's about keeping yourself conscious. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's speaking truth that makes others flinch. That's real kindness, not the absence of pain, but the presence of integrity. So next time you're praised for being calm, polite, or endlessly understanding, ask yourself, is this kindness or compliance? Am I giving peace or losing pieces of myself? Because the Lucifer effect isn't destiny. It's a warning. It shows us how fragile our morality is when left unexamined, and how powerful it becomes when guided by awareness. Every act of conscious kindness is an act of rebellion against moral sleep. It's how we humanize systems that dehumanize, how we stay awake in a world that teaches us to go numb. So no, you don't have to stop being kind. You just have to stop being kind at your own expense. Kindness without boundaries breeds destruction. But kindness with awareness? That's redemption. It's how you turn the Lucifer effect on its head by choosing light consciously, not blindly. By refusing to be good at the cost of being whole. And maybe that's the true test of humanity. Not whether we can stay kind when it's easy, but whether we can stay conscious when it's not.